6a, and it is multiplying real numbers. Okay, 16a. So there's two little ideas that we got to make sure we're good on. Faith, put that away. The first is if you're multiplying numbers with the same sign versus the second, which is if you're multiplying numbers with different signs. Okay, so if you multiply two numbers with different signs. Okay, so for instance, if I said 2 times -3, okay? If I multiply two numbers with different signs like that, one's positive, one's negative, what happens, Elijah? It will always be negative, okay? So two numbers with different signs, you're going to get a negative answer. Okay? So two numbers with different signs will always be a negative answer. If you're going to, that's an asterisk, sorry, multiply two numbers with the same sign, so like 3 times 8, or maybe it's -3 times -8. If you multiply two numbers with the same sign, what will your answer be? Positive or negative? Not. If I do 3 times 8 or -3 times -8, it will always be positive, right? So you're going to get a positive answer if they have the same sign. You're going to get a negative answer if they have opposite signs. Okay, so one of each, negative, two of the same, positive. All right, so let's do this. Do you know if we keep that going further? What if I multiply three numbers that all have the same sign? So let's say I do 3 negative numbers. A negative times a negative times a negative. Do you know what you would get? A negative, right? So basically, here's how it works. If you have an odd number of negatives in your problem, it will be negative. If you have an even number of negatives when you're multiplying, it will be positive. Okay, but we're going to focus just on the two for now. We'll get more into the fancier ones as we go. So I'm going to ask, what is each product? Here it is. So the first one, I have 12 times -8. Okay, so before you even try to plug this into a calculator, try to do the mental math. Tell me, is this going to be a positive or a negative answer? It's going to be a negative answer because you have one of each. So we know it's going to be negative. Does anyone know 12 times 8 off the top of their head? 96. Is that bad? So you get a -96 when you do 12 times -8. Okay, what do you get for this? If I do 32 times 0.5, okay, is it going to be a positive or a negative answer? Positive. It's going to be positive because all we have are positives, right? Do you know what that is off the top of your head without plugging it in? 32 times 0.5, another way to say 0.5 is half, right? So half of 32 is 16. How about this one? -3/4 times 1/2. Okay, now here's where we have to be a little bit careful, because yesterday we added and subtracted fractions. And what do you have to do when you add and subtract fractions? You have to find a common denominator. Today we're multiplying fractions. Do you need a common denominator? No, you just multiply straight across, right? So I'm going to multiply my numerators. What do I get? -3, right? If it's a negative and a positive, it's going to be negative. So you get -3 over what?
8.
Over 8. So one was positive, one was negative. Our answer is negative. So far, so good? All right, last one in this set. What if I do -3 squared? Is my answer going to be positive or negative? If it's -3 squared. What's another way to say -3 squared? What are you doing, Ryan? -3 times -3, right? If it's -3 squared, it's essentially saying -3 times -3, right? If I multiply two negatives, what is my answer going to be? A positive. So my answer here would be a +9. Okay, so keep that in mind. When you square a negative, it will always be positive. Now, the difference is if I said -3 squared, that's saying the opposite of 3 squared. Well, 3 squared is 9, so this would be a -9. But because they put the parentheses around this D guy, that's -3 times -3. Okay? Questions on that? No, this is saying the opposite of 3 times 3. Right? So 3 times 3 is 9. The opposite of 9 is -9. That's what this is saying. Does that make sense? So it's 3 squared, and you're taking the opposite of that. Okay. So I think I said this to you earlier when, oh no, I didn't. I haven't. Okay. Tomorrow, the next time I see you, Friday, I'll give you a little catchy thing for how to divide fractions, dividing fractions. But there's also a catchy little saying for when you multiply fractions. So I'll write it here just to help you remember. Here's what it is. Multiplying fractions is no problem. Multiply the top. Then multiply the bottom. Okay, multiplying fractions is no problem. Multiply the top, then multiply the bottom. So that will just kind of help you remember how to multiply when you're doing fractions. If you're struggling with what is what for that. How are we doing? Good? Okay, the last thing we're going to do is dealing with simplifying square roots. And then we're done with this one. So this is example 2. And they're going to say simplify the square roots. All right, so for this first one, if I say the opposite of the square root of 25, can you tell me what number that would equal? -5, right? Because the square root of 25 is 5, and they're saying the opposite. So that negative out in front is saying the opposite of that radical. So the opposite of the square root of 25 would be a -5. Okay? Whereas sometimes they'll do it like this. They'll say positive and negative. square root of 4 over 49. Okay, so your answer, because they have the positive and negative of it, your answer needs to be positive and negative. So you're going to put the plus and minus right on top of each other for that. And then what's the square root of 4 over 49? Not negative, just 2 over 7. So this positive negative is saying we want the positive version of this 4 over 49 and the negative version of that square root of 4 over 49. So your answer, when you take the square root of 4, you get 2. Square root of 49, you get 7. So it's a positive 2/7 and a negative 2/7. Okay? Okay, so what would this be? The opposite of the square root of 121. Is your answer positive or negative? Negative, because it has that negative out in front. What's the square root of 121? 11. So negative 11 would be your answer. We'll just circle or box those. 1 over 11 would be wrong. Yeah. Yeah, because it's just the square root of 121. If it was the square root of 1 over 121, that would be 1 over 11. No, just 121. Okay, last one. Positive and negative square root of 81. What's your answer? Positive and negative 9, right? So whatever symbol is out in front, that's the symbol that your answer should have. So this one's going to be positive and negative 9. Okay, so just look to these symbols for what symbol you put out here. Okay, those symbols will stay the same when it's taking radicals like that. Any questions on that? Okay, that's multiplying real numbers.